Just kidding, y'all. I would totally never do that to you. I wouldn't give you a recycled flip for your very last West Civ flip, right? Your very last flip for me. And this your year that you took on so many things and y'all rose to so many challenges and you did so well, masks and COVID precautions and an intense year where a lot of y'all felt like you really kind of had to up your game a little bit, especially for your very first intense history class. So honestly, there's a couple things I'll say at the very end of this thing, but let's go ahead and dive in and pick right up where we left off in class when we were talking about the invasion of Europe by the Allied forces during the latter half of the during the 1943, 44, 45, right? So we discussed in class today, we talked about the Pacific theater, the European theater, why Japan got involved, how are you going to attack the European theater? Okay, we're going to sweep in through North Africa, right? Operation Torch. And then we also discussed how you need Russia to hold on. You really need Russia to hold on in those big cities of Moscow, Leningrad, Stalingrad, and not give in to Hitler's forces and not succumb to the pressures of all these things, much like none of you succumb to the pressure of Western Civ, and y'all were keep kicking butt, and y'all have done great things. So much like the Russians in World War II, y'all held back the advances and actually prevented those terrible grades and testness and blah. Needless to say, I'm proud of all of you. Now, anyway, but to keep getting into it, right? We then discussed how the invasion of Italy got kind of stonewalled by the Nazi and Italian forces, right? And there was a heavy amount of losses incurred in the invasion of Italy. So the Allies then decided to open up a new theater coming in through France, and it was in this process known as Operation Overlord, a.k.a. D-Day, which was the invasion of France. We talked about in class how this happened on June 6th, 1945, and how the Allies mounted a massive joint assault on Normandy, or the beaches of Normandy, which is in northern France, right? Normandy, G period, say it with me. Normandy is in northern France. It's not a different country. All right, so now look, this opened up a gaping hole in the Nazi defenses, and waves of troops begin to come in. We used 3 waves in D-Day in this insanely glorious moment in American history, still considered one of the largest invasions in American military history. Very massive joint effort. And of course, it also used not only attacks by sea, but it also included attacks using a new division of the Army known as paratroopers, right? That actually were dropped behind enemy lines. So D-Day is then going to cause a massive Allied push, right? And once this came in, and once this actually push was created, you were only a few hundred miles from a very all-important city, Paris. And so Paris is going to be liberated by the Allies, and the French are going to rejoin the Allied forces. Well, the Northern French are going to rejoin the Allied forces, and the Americans and the British and the Russians have just got a major ally back in this war, right? Because Paris is liberated, Northern France is now involved, and here come the Allies pushing in towards Germany, because look at the situation Hitler's in, right? Hitler is really stuck between the massive advances of all these different forces. The Russians have created a stone wall of defense right here, being like, we will not lose the cities of Stalingrad, Leningrad, and Moscow to the Germans, right? And then also, since the D-Day invasion was successful, the Germans have had to pull some of their forces away to defend Germany itself, and also to be pushed onto this Western Front. And the Allies are beginning to push up and through Italy, and the lines just keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the door just keeps getting shut further and further and further in on Nazi Germany and fascist Italy as well. And here come the Allies, right? Now, there's a massive battle, though, that happens in the Ardennes forest, mostly outside of a city known as Bastogne, and most of this is taking place in what you would call Belgium or Western Germany, right? So the Allies began to push the Germans back, and a huge standoff broke out in the Ardennes forest in January of 1945 as the assault began to slow due to one of the most intense winters that the Europe had ever seen in many years, right? The winter was extremely grueling, and the Allies were fighting in snowy conditions, and they were lacking proper heat-giving equipment and proper jackets and proper food provisions, but the Allies will push forward, even though apparently the weather was so bad in this area that it caused a massive bulging out of the lines, especially here in the Canadian and the British sector, and also as the Americans began to push in, the Nazis actually bulged out in this line as well. At one point, they actually encircled an entire paratrooper division inside of this little or around this little city called Bastogne. And it was actually a very, very intense moment because an entire group of Americans had no idea they were surrounded on all sides by the Germans, right? And so this thing became known as the Battle of the Bulge due to the fact that the lines began to bulge out and due to the fact that the weather in the winter was so harsh that the Americans had no idea where each other were. They didn't know where the Germans were. They didn't know where the Brits and the Canadians were. And it was a very, very intense final standoff. Now, in this moment, though, since the Americans win the Battle of the Bulge and begin to keep pushing the lines back further and further and further into Germany, then comes the coward's way out, y'all. The coward's way out, and by the spring of 1945, the Russians are now pushing into Berlin, which is the German capital. The Allies are pushing into the east and up through Italy, right? The Allies are coming in from the east through France, and what happens? The Italians turn on Benito Mussolini and blame him for their losses in World War II and blame him for their encroaching defeat. So he is shot and killed by his own people. Him and many of his advisors end up getting hung upside down from a gas station roof where their bodies are then pummeled and beaten by Italian citizens, right? Basically, a large Mussolini piñata ends up occurring. Hitler then goes into a bunker, seeing the fact that the Russians are going to take over Germany at any moment, after being assaulted for 3 years and losing somewhere in the neighborhood of 26 million people, and also having many Soviet citizens placed inside of what are known as concentration camps. Also, concentration camps were used against the Russian POWs, and very cruel treatment by the Nazi officers. Here come the Russians, so Hitler takes the coward's way out. He goes down into a bunker with his wife and their dogs, and he actually kills their dogs, has his wife commit suicide. He takes a cyanide pill and then shoots himself, right? And the only thing that we found in this bunker, this is the bunker where he actually did the suicidal act, and the only thing we found apparently of his body was a jawbone, right? The only thing left of Hitler's dead body, which is what has led to a lot of conspiracy theories that apparently he ran away to Argentina, but it's not true. It actually, Hitler's jaw. So actually a French scientist has recently found out and recently clarified the fact that it is proof positive that Hitler's jaw was, or like the jawbones and the dental records that actually were found in the crematorium where, where Hitler actually, well, this says it confirms he's a vegetarian. This is the jawbone that was actually found in the crematorium or the cremated remains of Hitler. And a French scientist has recently used this to prove the fact that it was Adolf Hitler himself and his remains actually in that pile of ashes and corpse, right? So Hitler then kills himself, and so what becomes known as VE Day commences. On May 8th, 1945, following another incursion of Allies to try and find some hidden SS officers in the mountains of Germany and things like that, and where these different areas they were held up, the Allies push up, they take Hitler's massive stronghold that's on top of this huge mountain in Germany, at the top of the, it's not the Alps, I guess it does grow up in the Alps, but it's called the Eagle's Nest, right? And victory in Europe is declared, because Hitler could not do so many things, and especially could not hold on to this continent using an ideology of hate, right? So big things going forward, though. Now we're turning to the Pacific theater, right? Our strategy was by the Allies, Europe first, right? Take Europe first, okay? So big thing to understand, though, it wasn't really Europe first, right? We were in the Pacific theater the entire time, right? So, like, the Allies didn't do really this Europe first the whole way. As of about 1942, you're seeing some major battles break out, like Haley, the Battle of Midway, right? She's seen that film, and she knows exactly what I'm talking about. But there's a lot of major battles of the Pacific theater that were happening around 1942 and are actually going hand in hand with Operation Torch and the sweeping through of North Africa and things like that. You've got things like Battle of Midway, the Battle of Guadalcanal, the storming of the Solomon Islands, right? So, and the Allies begin to push in using massive naval warfare, and then also it was a huge amount of air raids and air bombings that were actually being taken, and most of the Battle of Midway, Guadalcanal, and the Solomon Islands actually took place in the air, right? Then the Allies, after 1942, are going to adopt a new strategy known as island hopping, right? That is definitely going to be a fill-in-the-blank question on the test. But island hopping basically entailed the idea of slowly but surely jumping from island to island to island and pushing the Japanese forces out of them, right? Starting here in the Marshall Islands and then pushing further and further in. They would then eventually go into the Philippines, and some very major battles are going to break out due to the island hopping strategy. Land sieges of Iwo Jima and Okinawa being some of the famous ones. And like I said, for example, this is actually a picture of soldiers planting the American flag on the island of Iwo Jima while the Allies had adopted this island hopping strategy, right? So this is all, of course, remember, taking place in the Pacific Theater, right? And this, of course, right here is a part of the land siege of Okinawa, right? And now the Pacific Theater was extremely intense, very chaotic, and very violent. A lot of this due to the fact that the Japanese had dug inside of many of these islands. Some of them had subterranean pillboxes and subterranean areas where they would be able to fire from a protected area. The Allies are going to come in with a very newish kind of weapon. The flamethrower is going to become a massive weapon of the island sieges and the island hopping strategy inside the Pacific Theater. But whenever they got to Iwo Jima and Okinawa, they then had to make a decision because Iwo Jima and Okinawa are actually located right here and right here, right? So there's Iwo Jima right there, Okinawa is right there. So as you can see, once these two islands were taken, you're right on the doorstep of Japan, right? So if you're on the doorstep of Japan, you've got to decide, do we invade Japan directly, right? If you try to start a land war in Japan directly, you are now on Japanese home turf. They will be able to redirect their entire military forces into saving, preserving, and also preventing an Allied assault on their homeland. So what do? Well, the Manhattan Project apparently was going to serve as that answer. So one of the most controversial decisions in Western civilization's history pops up, right? The entire time for most of World War II, there was this thing occurring known as the Manhattan Project. And the Manhattan Project was a secret campaign led by a group of scientists, right? And these scientists included former German scientists as well as American scientists like this guy, and you need to write his name down. He's very important. Roger, R-O-G-E-R, Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer, okay? Roger Oppenheimer. Roger Oppenheimer was the leader of the Manhattan Project, and at this project, they had developed a weapon. When the Allies had taken Okinawa and Iwo Jima, by that point, the Americans, using the Manhattan Project, developed a weapon known as nuclear bombs, right? So FDR had died April 12th, before victory in Europe was ever even claimed. And his vice president then would rise up and take his place. And that guy's name is Harry S. Truman, right? You're going to need to know FDR and Harry S. Truman for your test, okay? Truman is going to rise to the presidency following the death in his fourth term of FDR, and he is going to have to make one of the most intense decisions of all time. And instead of deciding to invade Japan directly to save as many American lives as possible, he instead decided to threaten Japan with a direct attack using nuclear arms. And after the Japanese refused to surrender early on, the very first bomb dropped would be the bomb known as Little Boy from the plane known as the Enola Gay, right? This right here is the Little Boy nuclear device that was dropped on the city of Hiroshima on August 6th, 1945, right? This right here is the actual cloud created by the explosion, okay? And after the Japanese still yet again refused to surrender 3 days later, the next nuclear provision, Fat Man, which is this guy right here, is the bomb that would be dropped on the city of Nagasaki, right, on August 9th, 1945, which was an even larger nuclear device than Little Boy itself. So going forward, the death toll of this would be over 200,000 civilians. Japanese citizens, regular people died in these two bombings. And by September, the Japanese would give their unconditional surrender, right? Japan would then surrender on September 2nd, 1945, right? So with this, we have to understand that now as we come to a close, overall, it is believed that World War II, including the Holocaust, the bombings of Japan, is going to cost the lives of 85 to 100 million people, veterans and civilians together, right? At the time, that was 3 to 5% of the entire world population. Land on multiple continents has now been destroyed. And on top of everything, why did this happen? Why did 85 to 100 million people die in a war that possibly could have been avoided? It's all because of a rise of power through a hateful message, right? The rise of fascism in Europe through a message and an ideology of hate led to the cataclysmic events that would then lead to the deaths of 85 to 100 million people. 5% of the world population. That's absolutely mind-blowing. But so the day, September 2nd, 1945, would be known as VJ Day. And that right there, y'all, is the end of Western Civ, right? That is the end. That is everything that I need to teach you for this year. And just a quick thing that I would like to say is that it has been an absolute pleasure to have all of you, right? I have enjoyed this entire year with y'all through everything, through all the challenges. I think I have found so many kids this year, so many students that have blown me away in their enthusiasm, blown me away in their academics, and really, really, really have just kind of set the tone of kids that I want to teach going into the future and kids that I'm going to truly miss teaching. So needless to say, I want to say thank y'all so much for a fantastic year. You guys are great, and I can't wait to see y'all keep growing here at Chappelle and keep being successful, and I can't wait to see y'all accomplish your dreams. So y'all have a great one. I'll see y'all soon.